Bassheads, what's good? Welcome to another episode of the Blue Collar Bassist Podcast. If we haven't met yet, my name is Ted and I talk bass. My goal is to help bass players of all levels and abilities navigate the world of what I like to call the blue collar bassist. And one of the ways that I do that is through conversations like the one that I'm having today with my dear friend Cam Perridge. He's a guitarist, a mixing engineer, a producer, just an all-around good dude, but who knows a thing or a thousand about what guitarists and producers want from bass players. And so I want you to stick around. Listen to this entire episode. If you're watching on YouTube, watch this entire thing because Cam, particularly towards the end, is going to drop some real nuggets about what producers and guitarists want from bass players. So I hope you enjoy. I'm sorry that I'm not here with you live today. I'm out on a gig, but here we are. Enjoy this episode with my good friend Cam Perridge. Missed it, who are watching on the replay. Cam is a very good friend of mine. We have played more gigs than either of us could count. He co-produced, mixed my album, which is linked somewhere around this content. He's a guy who knows. He's played with a lot of dope bass players. He's produced a lot of music, a lot of great music. He's a guy who knows. And so who better to talk to about what a guitar player and a producer wants in a bass player. Let's start from like the guitar player perspective. You're on a gig. I mean, what's the rhythm section got to be like for you?
For me, and I definitely thought about this a lot, the answer to that is assertive. Okay? And assertive is a multifaceted thing. So, everybody talks about pocket a lot. Actually, guitar players don't talk about pocket enough, but apparently bass players and drummers do.
Yeah.
So ideally you got pocket. And anybody who's played more than a few gigs know that if you have a part memorized or you're reading off a chart, there's a certain, you can play it stronger when it's internalized. So there's stronger and weaker ways to play parts. And then the third part of that, I think, is tone. Is that, if you have a really boomy tone that's not defined, that's not going to work. If you have a really small tone, if it's over bright. So having a balanced tone, but I guess in order of importance, having pocket, playing the part like you own it, and having a balanced tone, those three things together, I think, result in playing assertively. You make the music feel as good as it can from what you're doing. And so those are cumulative things.
Now you're saying playing the part like you own it. You're not talking about playing the part note for note like it is on the recording.
Well, depending on, and I think probably your audience is bigger than, you and I think a lot about, playing like other people's music, but it also could be somebody playing something they wrote themselves. So it's not necessarily, the part is the part. In certain situations, it's more important than others, obviously.
Sure.
And, if you're playing funk music or whatever, or classic songs, then the classic part or something close to it is going to be what is going to be most best received.
Just own it is what you're saying.
Own it. And my personal preference is when bass players are loud.
Okay, let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
If you think about all the instruments that can be loud. If drums are loud, the cymbals are hurting you. The snare is going to take the enamel off your teeth. Guitar players are always loud, and the problem with them is that their amps are pointed at their backs of their legs. They don't know how bright they are.
Sure.
So too loud guitar is difficult. But when bass is loud, everything feels that much better. And so obviously within reason, and if you have a boomy room, so I'm assuming that you have a reasonable sounding area that you're playing in. And I'm thinking of this because I was at a gig a couple of weeks ago as a player and a listener, and it was a boomy room and everything was terrible. But assuming you have a relatively balanced sonic place that you're playing in, if the bass is loud, it just feels extra good.
Yeah.
And I've been in the situation recently where when I was on an ears gig, and I needed to mute the bass player because he didn't have it together, and I didn't have it together enough to play through his mistakes. And I realized that as a guitar player, like a lot of what we feel good about, like being big, having a big tone, feeling full, actually comes from bass and guitar together. And if you hear guitar and drums, it's a hollow thing. I mean, and obviously some people set up their whole rig like that, like whatever, White Stripes, and they have like tons of fuzz and low end.
Sure,
But
sure.
just a regularly played guitar and regularly played drums without bass is a little bit sad. So bass is, I mean, it's not to say, oh yeah, your job is to make us feel good. But the question you asked me is, what does a guitar player want from a bass?
Yeah.
And I don't know that every guitar player is cognizant of this. But, bass players make us feel better than we actually are. And I've realized that, and I've seen it in other situations where, I can think of a bass player who does duo gigs with like guitar players who have all these crazy chops. And there's a couple of them that they play with. And those guitar players have like amazing facility, but their pocket isn't that good. Probably years of wanting to play fast means that they're always kind of on top of it, and like maybe to the detriment of the music. And so if you're playing something simply as a bass player, you can anchor that. You can make them sound so much better just by virtue of you doing your thing.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to build a house on a crappy foundation. And I mean, right? I mean, I've said it before that bass players don't get the luxury of kind of knowing songs, right? We just don't get that luxury. And so I've said to people, the bass player is the most important person in the band, and it's not because I play the instrument or trying to bulldoze in. It's the bass player, whoever the bass player is, whoever's running the bass frequency is the link between rhythm and harmony. What is on the bottom is going to really affect everything on the top. And I could only imagine being in that situation where the bass player didn't have it together, and you're like, what do you do? You know what I mean?
You hit mute, and luckily that was an ears gig, so I had that luxury. I wasn't happy to do it. Let me be clear.
Yeah. Don't call any names.
So no.
So what about, you said a lot in a very, very short amount of time about.
Have you met me?
Yeah. Let me tell y'all something. When I met this guy, the first day I meet this guy outside of, what was it, Last Day Saloon in San Francisco?
Yeah.
And I think we might have missed our stage time playing with two different bands. And we spend 45 minutes talking about Michelle and Deggiocello. I mean, we've just fast friends over one bass player, and then we start going deep down the rabbit hole. I mean, God, we've got some stories about some different things. I mean, I know I'm a different bass player than I was when you met me. And that
you weren't even in school at that point.
No, I hadn't gone to school. I mean, there was a lot.
Your degree
there was a lot of things. There was a lot of things that were, even even as long as I had been playing, I didn't really have what I wanted to do tone wise or whatever. And you're one of the people that really helped me develop some vocabulary around what I liked, what I wanted to sound like. There's something that you would say that I've heard you say several times, and I want you to dive a little bit deeper into this if you can.
Okay.
When you said people play how they are. You may not remember saying that, but I've heard you say.
But I actually thought about that recently too.
Yeah. No. That's where I tell that to people. I got that from you. So what are your thoughts on that?
Here's the thing, though. That's within parameters of the job, and it's so funny that I don't remember saying that, but I was thinking about this week. And here's the thing, if you're a sheet metal worker, even if you're a delicate person, you got a job to do. Yeah. You got to pound that sheet in front of you. Yeah. That's like the work that you have to do.
Yeah.
So there's specific parameters. So if you're a soft-spoken person, I still need you to play assertively if we're playing music that demands that. So your version of that is the interpretation. And so people play the way they are in that way. So you could be, within those parameters of being a useful musician, of doing the job of making people shake their asses and supporting the
Sure.
singer, which is basically what we do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hopefully also being a catalyst for transcendence, but not every gig.
A catalyst for transcendence.
That sounds so pretentious. But, you can delete that part.
It's no secret that you and Angeline Saris are a couple, and she is.
That's not a secret.
That is not a secret. It's very well known fact. They in love, y'all. She's one of the. She works. I mean, she is really out there, and she has been for years. And
she had a week last month where she played 8 gigs.
Wow.
And she's working time. And I think the reason that she gets the calls is a couple. I mean, I met her on a session. So we met like 8-9 years before we got together. The very first day I met her was in the studio, but and we gigged together before we were together. And what I know about what she brings is she's ruthlessly prepared. She always has it backwards and forwards, and she brings. She understands the foundation part, but she brings a little bit extra in terms of the color, and that can be studio live, and it's not like some people will just be overplaying. She just enhances. And one band leader that she plays for said to me, when Angie's on the gig, I just don't worry. And, and that's because of her preparedness. That's because of just how she anchors things. And I think that really encapsulates a lot of why she gets the calls that she does. It's that, if the band leader is saying, when you're on the gig, I don't worry, then you're doing the right thing to get hired.
Yeah, absolutely. And she doesn't own a lot of basses, does she?
No, just a handful.
I mean, I've only really seen her play that one Fender that she's been playing for quite a long time.
I mean, I could list them.
I know that you could, but you got the inside track, is what I'm saying. So I'm gonna assume that a prepared bass player is on your list of criteria, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean that
goes without saying, right?
Yeah, and as you said, with guitar players, if we don't know the stuff, we can do that thing. Guitar plays kunga. We're like, oh, I'm a fully percussive instrument. There's no harmonic information coming out because it's a choice, not because I didn't learn the damn tune.
Right.
You don't have that look.
Right.
So no, absolutely. And there's something to be said for just each person in the rhythm section doing their job, because as a guitar player, what's fun is we're part of your guys' world. We're part of the rhythm section, and we're also harmonic. We're also kind of like the singer's right hand man or woman, depending on. So we're kind of in the middle of the band, which is really fun. But when the rhythm section is doing its thing right, and I reflected on this a couple of weeks ago, on a funk gig, it was like me, the bass player, and the drummer were playing together, and I was like, man, we're just all in our spots. Where I'm up high. Bass player is really fat. The drummer is like playing exactly the right amount, not too little, not too much. And I just really felt how all of us working together, there was a synergy bigger than the sum of the parts. And that's the beautiful thing about a rhythm section is the section part. Yeah. Is that we all boost each other if we do our job right.
Yeah. I want to wear a shirt sometimes that says, "Ain't nobody getting famous tonight." You know what I mean? Just
my shirt says, "Didn't learn it, won't be playing it."
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a musical maturity thing, right? There's a maturity thing.
Sure, yeah.
Where it's like, when you are listening, when you are ruthlessly prepared, the music, right? That it's got to start there. You can hear, well, this person is playing in this register. That person's playing over here. You know what? It's okay. The same thing about like fills. Maybe everybody doesn't need to fill up that same spot every 8 or 16 bars. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because everybody's going to naturally feel the fills in that spot. But do you have to play it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's a thing about, obviously playing with other people, we all have our tendencies, and there'll be certain
Sure.
people where you'll gel with them better in terms of just, the spaces that you play. Like in Sally's band, I play with another guitar player, Mike Weiner.
Oh,
The
I know,
very
Mike.
first time we played together, it just worked.
Yeah.
We didn't have to think about it. It's the weirdest thing that I'm with him, where there's other players. There's a couple guys in the church that I saw about sometimes who they play amazingly well together. And I always feel that when I step into that building, it's like, oh, these guys are so great together. I'm not gonna be able to connect in that same way. So sometimes it's just magic, and the other times you got to think about it. You got to listen and be sensitive. And
Mike is great.
guitar players are not always that good at that.
Sure,
We're
sure.
not always the best at listening.
Sure. I just saw something with it must have been Sal's greenhouse with you and Mike. And Mike's such a nice guy. He's a
Oh my God, one of my favorites. He
he's,
really
he
is.
is such a nice. Didn't he just get married?
Oh, it's a couple of years. He's been married. They're awesome together. I love those
Yeah,
guys.
he's dope. Let's talk about. We talked a little bit about on-stage collaboration, but let's say there's a project that you're working on. What kind of, and this could go for bass players, any musician, right? What kind of communication are you looking for from them that says, this is a person that I definitely want to work with again, that I definitely want to have back in my space again?
Do you mean as a guitar player or as a producer or just in general?
In general, in general.
I mean, as a guitar player, I really resonate with positivity. So I did a gig just last week, and the drummer was one of those dudes who's like, yeah, like super psyched the whole fucking, God, if I can swear in this, the whole darn gig. And the bass player
Do you know who
is
I
somebody
am?
I played with before, and he's more of a serious looking dude when he plays. He just is kind of has a more serious, not mad, but that kind of like face when people are playing. And so I noticed after the gig that I was just thinking that I really fed off the drummer's positivity. Now that's me, and that's not everybody. And it's not like you can fake it. Like if you're somebody who just, when you're playing, you're not like super positive. You're just in the zone, and maybe you even have whatever resting bitch face as a dude.
Yeah.
That's fine, but I just recognized that the positivity. And after the gig, the drummer was still super positive. The bass player was positive too because he wasn't concentrating anymore. He was able to smile.
Sure.
But positivity, like being easy to work with, those are like kind of cliches, but it's really true. Be it if you're in a rock band that you're starting up, or if you are, like on a thankless gig where nobody's listening.
Yeah.
What you have is your friends. You have that, or and it could be fast friends. Could be people you just met that day, but you have a connection to the music to trying to do the job well.
Sure.
And so that's a huge part of this thing. It really is. And if it's not your, natural tendency, then you have to find your version of it again. You should never be like fake because people are not going to like resonate with that either. But just recognizing that even if you're a shy person or a serious person, that, those kinds of things will help to get you calls, cultivate your version of that. I
Sure.
think that should be helpful.
Listen, I know from personal experience, it took me a while to develop that kind of, I mean, I am who I am. People are who they are, but,
Exactly.
navigating different personalities. I mean, musicians, I guess by nature, you have to be sort of a certain type of personality to even get into this, right? So we've got our own hang-ups and emotions and different things like that. One of the things, especially in recent years, is like, man, I don't know one musician who has cured AIDS, COVID, or cancer. So it's like,
Right.
it's like we can't take ourselves that seriously. We can take what we're doing seriously and be, but what you were talking about, I love that term, ruthlessly prepared. When we are ruthlessly prepared, then you can just you can relax. Things will always go sideways a little bit, but
And let's be clear, the more that you work or whatever, I balance a lot of things in my life. It's rare for me to be ruthlessly prepared. I show up prepared to some degree. A lot of times on gigs, I'm shedding before the downbeat or, try to remember how a particular section goes. That's another thing is you can, really go the extra mile to having the parts under your finger when it comes time to hit the stage. I got a call last year for a gig. I got a call at 1, the downbeat was at 5, and it was 50 songs, of which I'd played 20 before, and super deep, weird B-sides and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I hung up the phone from the call, started charting, got there, played the first, I actually got there, set up, charted, played the first set, made my excuses by charted my whole way through the gig, and barely missed anything. Now, not by virtue of me being like whatever, but it just that my sole purpose was not to mess up on that gig that whole time. And I've seen people show up like, oh, I just got the call, or the bass player goes up to the keyboard player. I've seen this before. Oh, I'm going to be leaning on you a lot, and you're like, dude, you have 20 minutes. You can write a couple charts. You still got time. You remember I said that to somebody on the gig?
Yes.
I said that to a keyboard player, but he was like, oh, I don't know the stuff, and I looked at me, I was like, you still got time.
I can recall. I recall that. Oh man! But you know what though? On me and Ashlyn were talking about this a little bit. I think and she was kind of talking about another thing as well, like people just relying on their giftings, right? I think we all develop a skill set over time where that 20 minutes, you'd be like, no, we'll be fine. You know what I mean? Because situations will always pop up where it's like, I know the songs that you sent me or this last minute change or whatever, we can kind of roll with the punches. We can get through that. I think that's a skill set that's developed over time. Right? I mean, how would you say one gets that the ability to just show up and play a bunch of tunes? Or have, know 20 out of 50 tunes?
It's time on the substrate. When you've played hundreds of corporate gigs, then you're going to know a certain amount of repertoire.
Sure.
What's interesting though is thinking about genre that you come from. The worst people for showing up not knowing the songs or not knowing the parts are jazz players. And they're like, oh, my ear, I can catch anything. This is so diatonically simple, I can
Sure.
grab this.
Sure.
And I feel like sometimes like everybody has their like rock players are always like, oh man, I can't so do crazy changes, but rock players are parts people, so it's like you coming from where you come from with your taste as a listener and where you start as a player also dictates probably what you need to work on. So if you are a jazz player, sure, you can navigate the changes of a pop song in your sleep, but knowing that there's a part that people really resonate with is a little bit different than a lot of what you see in the jazz world. Not entirely, and so that part, and being a rock player, a lot of times, you're going to play really steady and maybe there's room to open up or whatever. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that we're all, if you ever speak to classical musicians, they're amazed at people that can improvise. And the thought of sitting down and reading a symphony and playing it fills me with anxiety.
Sure.
That's incredible to me. And so, we all have our own, based on our learning, our where we started from, where we're going to, we all have limitations and strengths that we might not be aware of, particularly with strengths. You're always like, well, but that's easy. Of course I could do that.
Sure.
But to somebody else it might not be. So all of which is coming back to saying knowing parts is that, if you've been if you've mostly played R&B or rock, then you're going to be more part centric. And if you've been jazz, being more of a jazzer, you're more likely to be playing through the changes. And these are broad strokes. I'm sure jazz bass players can be like, "Shut up, Cam, it's nonsense."
Well,
but I've seen this a lot on.
I was having a conversation with a singer overseas actually, and she was recommending a drummer, and you talk about positivity. You would love this dude. I mean, he was awesome. But, we're in the situation. I had not really heard him play. And she was like, don't worry. He plays jazz. He can play anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, those are famous last words. And she doesn't, she didn't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've played enough corporate gigs to know that you could do, you could tell who the jazz people, who like the dyed in the wool jazz people are. This is also a broad stroke, but like the drummer will be killing cocktail hour, right?
Right.
Yeah. But cocktail hour is this. The rest of the gig is party music, top 40, old school R&B, all that. And they don't have, I don't mean to paint with such a broad stroke, but sometimes it's like that. And there's some people who get around just fine. I don't think I'm one of these people. I think I definitely have. I've said this before. I'm not the person that anybody calls for like a straight ahead jazz gig who's going to like swing all night. And at one time that might have hurt my feelings. And now I'm just like, yeah, you're probably right. I'm not the dude, I'm not the dude for that gig. So it's okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like both of us would rather that I wasn't on that gig.
Right. Oh man, I'm thinking I can't go too deep, but I was thinking about one of our last corporate gigs that you and I played together.
Oh my goodness, I know the one where the keyboard player had the ironing board with a sheet over it.
That's one of them.
There were three things that was weird about that gig. That was one.
That was one. That was another thing that we can't talk about publicly, but God. Oh, that was awkward. That was
Anyway,
that was awkward.
Moving
onwards. Let's talk about networking.
Okay.
Now, when I met you, I met you in San Francisco. God, this is early mid 2000s. And
you meant 2004.
2004.
20 years ago.
Gee whiz.
December. I don't remember what I did yesterday, but I know when we
That's crazy. But I don't think you had a car.
I did not have a car.
You didn't have a car. You were on the BART train, Bay Area Rapid Bay Area Rapid Transit. For those who don't know, with like a Fender Twin, a guitar on your back, and a Fender Twin. I wore
4 pairs of casters off of that amp.
I bet you
wore those puppies off.
So what? I mean,
rolling it down the street.
So I mean, and this applies for like every musician, and I know we live in like the social media world and everything now. But you had to like really, really, that takes a lot of dedication to go from San Francisco to Oakland, doing that kind of traveling. What was the progression for you in that scene? And how did you go about networking is what I'm getting at.
The way I got into all that was I was in a band that finished, and this is like I feel like such a dinosaur even talking about this, but it's like there was an advert for a singer needed a guitar player. I literally auditioned down the phone, like played unamplified down the phone to her, and then I ended up being the MD of that band eventually. And all that I would do, I would just show up. And I guess at that point, I really was super hungry. I wasn't mixing even at that point. So I was ruthlessly prepared, I guess, to use my own term back. I had the stuff. When I would show up, I would have stuff backwards and forwards. I would rarely have charts. I would know like whatever signature part. Yeah. And, I wasn't partying. So it wasn't like I met people through like hanging out and ripping it up at bars. I would just show up and play. And I think I was lucky in that the circles that I was moving in, R&B, and then from there church, there was maybe a shortage of guitar players, so I got lucky in that regard. I don't know. As far as, here's something people never talk about, though, as far as getting work, is the best way to get work is to hire somebody else. If you hire somebody, then they will call you. And the other thing about that is if you're maybe not at a level where you have connections, or maybe even not at a level to call certain kinds of players to be getting calls from certain kinds of players. If you're somebody who can get gigs and call other people, then you can kind of elevate the circle that you play with, and then as I've seen it happen all the time, though, if you hire somebody for something, then a lot of times they will hire you back, assuming that you do your job well and
Sure.
everything's cool.
Sure.
But so that's like one of these sort of it's people never talk about this anywhere. But if you're trying to think about other ways to get work, if you have some work that you can give to somebody, a lot of times that will then result in work. Assuming you're good at your job.
That's game. That's game. Nobody talks
And then
about
otherwise, and that applies to studio work, if you're trying to break into engineering, or like, so there's like a million different ways you can do things. I think the other thing is just persistence. It's like everything else, you kind of at a plateau and then you kind of break through and you break through. That happens with gigs. I remember in like 2007, I was kind of burnt because I felt like the people I was playing with weren't really prepared. And it just, the level, I was like, I felt ready to push. And then the next year, I met one drummer, and he was like, dude, you should, like, I'm going to call you for this thing. And then that led to another gig, another gig, another. There was like this one moment of like one call after playing like, I don't know, a couple hundred gigs in a couple of years. You remember, Adam Goodhue, he moved to Atlanta.
Yep.
Geez, over 10 years ago now, but he knew nobody there. And he started going to blues jams. And he's such a good player that he's a drummer. So, if you go to blues jams as a blues guitar player, you might not get so many calls. But he ended up building, like, his whole career started just from, like, he was already established in the Bay. He went out there and he built a whole second career, starting at East, but he started playing in blues clubs because that's where he could get to play, like, just going to jam. And then, like, he's such a great player. It's like, if you're a good player, you're going to get noticed. What happens is your goals change in life, and so, like, when you're younger, you want to be a rock star. Later on, you want to, just maybe do something on a local level. Later on, maybe you just want to make money in a way that doesn't kill you. But I noticed in myself, I wanted to be a rock star too my whole life. And in engineering, the mixing engineer is the rock star. It's like it's not like thousands of people freaking out, but I still recognize that desire in myself.
Sure.
Like, if you're a tracking engineer, you're not the rock star. If you're a live sound engineer, you're definitely the rock star. It's the most thankless thing. Mastering engineers, people just wonder what you do. But mixing engineer, you can, like, people call me crying because they're so happy with something that I put a lot of love into.
Well, I mean, you can tell. You can tell. I mean, the record that I tell anybody, the Brother Theodore St. Anne record sounds fantastic. It's a great record, and it's not because it's my record. It is because it is.
Well, you wrote some great tunes.
Well, I appreciate that.
And you did some great playing, and we called some great people.
Yeah,
and
but
we
I
were
mean,
there. I remember.
The
whole way.
It was like all these people. I mean, I remember sitting in the coffee shop, and like, I gotta do this thing. You know what I mean? And it's one of the things that I'm most proud of in this world.
You should be. It's a fantastic record. I'm still so proud of it. Before you go into your next question, we can circle back on something that you're talking about. You said, what makes me want to have bass players around live, but we didn't really talk about studio stuff.
Yeah, let's get into it.
One of the things so for me, when we talk about bass players, a lot of times, first of all, I'll call a rhythm section. So if I'm on gigs and I hear a certain bass player and drummer playing together, or maybe I just think about different players. So I typically don't call a drummer or a bass player. I'll call a rhythm section, thinking about how they play together. So that's one thing. How well do you play with others? The other is that, the kind of bass player, and I guess any musician that I want to be involved with as a producer, is somebody who's thinking about the arc of the song. And I recorded like a bass player a couple weeks ago he's a hobbyist. He has like a big guy tech job, but he has a band and he's in this rock band. And his approach, I was like, dude, this is such a professional approach. You don't make the predominance of your money doing this, but your mindset is absolutely on point. And he just was thinking about, how do we make the second verse a little bit bigger than the first verse? How do I find my little spot when all these like hell of guitar layers are doing something? How do I find my place? And I was so impressed by him just because he was so sensitive to the music, and he's not particularly seasoned. And like I said, he's not a pro, but so even if you're a hobbyist, you can still bring that to music. And that comes back to what I think most producers just want it to be easy. A lot of Eamon Flynn, keyboard player, and I were talking about this recently, that our production style, as is with Quincy Jones, is 95% of it is call the right person. You know, so it's like,
Wow.
okay, I know what you do well. I don't need you to do everything. I don't need you to play to play jazz. It doesn't matter. This is an R&B tune.
Yeah.
I know you're going to crush at that, and I know that you're going to vibe with this drummer, so you're going to get the call for those things. And then if you do 5% more, if you do a little taste of someone on the bridge, and you like really think about how the singers do, you know, that is what's going to get me to call you again. And there's no rocket science there. It's just sensitivity to the music.
Dude, I remember doing that when we were recording my record, and one of the first things you told me was like, I'm not tripping if you need to call another guitar player for this or that.
I don't know.
And, you know, Garth Weber played on a tune because I thought, you know, I wanted his feel or whatever. And
he killed it.
He absolutely killed it. But, you know, when we talk about, like, you know, no musician has cured a major disease or anything, but like really pushing the ego out of the way and say, you know, what's the best for the song, for the music? What are we ultimately doing here? You and I had a conversation. This is one of those things where I can't remember what I did a few hours ago, but I remember this conversation we were having. You know how long ago this was? Remember that little '94 Nissan that I used to drive with the where people had to jump out the window? You remember that?
I was one of those people.
You were one of those people. So that was back in the days. That was around 2004, 2005, something like that. Anyway, we were talking about what makes something funky or what makes something soulful. And I've been having a lot of conversations recently with different musicians about having the vocabulary to describe these things. You know what I mean? I mean, you can do it in a real esoteric way. You can do it in a real, like, concrete way. But what makes something feel good to you?
Really hard question to answer. I mean, you can talk about the amount that people are playing. You know, one of the things that I'm at some point going to write a mixing book. And one of the things I was going to say is that less is more is a subset of enough is enough. So it's not always space. It's not always tons. It's the right amount. As far as something to feel like legitimately funky or soulful, I don't think there's a shortcut to that. I think that comes from like really immersing yourself in the classics, actually. I mean, maybe there's people that just straight up comes out of, but certainly my journey was, you know, like playing funk. I spent so much time with James Brown's B-sides. Like I tried to like really just nail the feel, and maybe I had a predisposition towards that, and maybe I'm not that funky. All these things are possible, but you know, I feel like playing soul music. If you've never played gospel, you're only going to play it in kind of a limited way. So knowing the foundations, like, and not just knowing the, but like really like having dug into it so that you've internalized some of it. You know, recognizing that like you know. 3 Against 2 is like the underpinning of so much music, you know, and a lot of people don't even know that. You know, like digging back and realizing that like Fela Kuti influenced James Brown, who influenced, if you listen to like Off the Wall, like guitar player, something like guitar parts, but the guitar parts on Off the Wall, that came from Fela Kuti if you just trace it back. You know, those kind of lineages, understanding all that stuff. And, you know, what is that? Well, you would know, wasn't it Prince that said if it's funky, you can't really describe it?
Right.
But
right.
As far as, you know, doing something actionable, you know, because like really the question, if you're asking me what makes something funky, then really what you're saying is how can the people who listen to my podcast become funkier? You know, and that is work on your time. You know, if you're a rock player, probably you're going to rush 16th notes unless you've really worked on it. You know, there's probably certain things that you could do personally as somebody watching this podcast if you go and check out like your own playing analytically, maybe record yourself and look at the waveforms or whatever. But you know, the way that you personally can get funkier is by studying the classics, and you know, I guess that's how we learn in general, is learning something new and also improving what you have. So you know, there's certain things just defy logic, and I'll give you a good example. Is on the Tom Petty Wildflowers record, there's a song called "You Don't Know." It's either How It Feels or How I Feel. Okay. And Steve Ferroni, who's playing drums on it. Yeah. And it's the simplest beat, and it's gluey. It's like, and I can't work it out. And I even asked some friends who are drummers, I'm like, why does this feel so good? And they couldn't tell me.
Yeah.
I think part of it might be in the recording process. There's a certain kind of compression on the snare that makes it feel really explosive and yet like constrained.
Yeah.
But I listened to that pocket. I can't exactly explain what it is, but if you tried to play that and you weren't doing it right, I could at least say, well, hey, you know what, your snare is early, or you know what, your hi-hat's got to bounce more, or so you can get closer. I don't know if this is useful. There we go.
Well, no, I mean, I think, and I use the word funky because that's kind of, but I mean, any music has groove and it needs to feel good, right? There's that album, I can't think of the name of the song. You're going to laugh at me. Boom. Cat, 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 cat. Wow, what is that? Do you know what song I'm talking about? I can hear the kick drum pedal squeak, and something about that just feels so good. I like the way that it's, I can't even say that I like the way that it sounds. I like the way that it feels, and I'm just talking about the overall, like if a song could have an aura, that's what I'm talking about, right? This imperfect recording process. It's not pristine. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
It reminds me of being a little kid in the South, you know what I mean? And, being in the church or, whatever. Or being, in some hole-in-the-wall bar room when I shouldn't have been. What's the, for lack of a better word, professional standard, right? We're all together here. We're going to get through this thing. What does that look like in your world?
I like it when players are heads up. So I'm the kind of player that if we're going to the bridge, I'm looking around at everybody. I like it if an MD cues everybody, even if we already know where we're going. It just feels good to me. So I'm the kind of guy, I'm always looking around. I cue off the singer. If we know a section's coming, I'm looking at people. So I'm just a heads up kind of player in general. And I think that comes from like years of being on the bandstand, and because bandstand chops is a thing. And if you've like done a ton of club gigs and you've had to like improvise endings and solos and arrangements on the fly, that happens from eye contact, and people are kind of, if there's something in a song, bum, 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 that probably we can all end on bum, bum, that kind of stuff if you've done enough of these. And there's generally, there's a few things that we're going to communicate in terms of like dynamics or, stay here or go somewhere else, those kind of things. One thing that is funny though, is it's on the subject of communication, is if things are going wrong, sometimes it's really hard to fix it. I was on a gig before when actually it was my fault, where the singer changed. It was a 2-chord song in the last 6 months. The singer changed the key. And I forgot, and I played it in the original key, and I was sure the bass player was messing up. I was like, dude, what is he doing? And the singer was yelling at us both. And because there was only 2 chords, we couldn't get out of it.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, I thought we did was do like lead through the 5 or something, to go back to the 1.
Yeah.
But it was one of those like,
Yeah.
And I had one other gig. This is a classic. This is a corporate. And the keyboard player's sister sat in on bass. I don't know why. She's a jazz player too.
Okay.
She can play anything without hearing it. And we did that Dua Lipa song, "Don't Start Now, Don't Stop Now, Don't Start
now, Don't Start Now."
And there's 2 4-chord sections in that song, right?
Yeah.
And she got flipped. She was playing the chorus over the verse and the verse over the chorus. And we were like 30 feet apart. And I don't know why the keyboard player didn't even notice, but I noticed. And the singer like had that look like, I don't understand what's going wrong, but I know something. And I couldn't articulate to her, you're in the wrong section. Like there's no hand motion for her to flip it. So eventually what I did is I turned up stupid loud. The only thing I could think of to do is like when all else fails, I was like, okay, I'm going to be loud. I'm going to be like ungodly volume. And then you're going to know that my part, like this is it. And then she got it. And then I turned back down.
Yeah. Well, you know what though? But I think we could talk about this. I mean, this could be a whole nother conversation about technology, right?
Yeah.
I think I love technology. I love that there's, iReal Pro and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
man, there's a balance. There's a balance. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's been I've been frustrated with myself. I was telling somebody just the other night, like, there's a couple tunes I'm like, you need to know that song. Just know the song. Stop pulling up a chart every
Yeah.
time the song comes up. Just learn the song. I had a Bourbon Street gig in Blair.
Mm.
Nice, beautiful cat. But first of all, was always looking up a chart for "I Will Survive," which was problematic for me. And like there'd be certain things. And one day I just because I'm like kind of co-leading the band, and I was just like, hey man, your ears still got to work. You know what I mean? You can't just like be buried in the chart. Your ears still have to work. And I think also when we're trying to run around and musician life, when you got to take, if you're taking every gig in town, it becomes hard to be like really stellar at a couple of gigs. But then that's also people got to eat, so they got to.
Yeah. And there's an art to that too, though. I'm not particularly good at it. If I have charts, I tend to get stuck on the page a little bit more. But there's players I know who, and I'll like, and anytime I see a drummer show up with charts, I'm always like, oh, is their pocket really going to be any good?
Yeah.
Are they going to play like that, like a theater drummer? They're going to be all polite and they're going to know the parts, but it's not going to move me. But there's players who can do it. There's a bass player I did a regular church gig for a lot of years, and he charted everything meticulously, and he still played with tons of feeling, and he was still there. So it's possible. And I know Angie will have like her iPad and she'll tell me like maybe I just need it for like the first half of the bridge in a song or something. It can just be like a quick check in on some part.
Yeah.
So it is surprising to me too, though. The thing that surprises me is wedding band singers that'll have lyrics for September up. I'm like, I have a suspicion that you might be able to do this without this chart here.
Yeah, real
but
talk.
I don't know. There's like everybody has their thing. That
Well,
is good for them. I think for me to say, if you can do the job, then you can do the job.
I mean, true. I think with singers, particularly, I don't. If you've got your lyrics discreetly set up on a stand, and I know that I can't imagine having to remember lyrics for every song under the sun. But then there are some tunes, September being one of them, where I'm just like, you're working. You're working. That's that's hard hat overalls music, man. You're supposed to just kind of know that. You remember Nate Ginsburg?
Yeah.
You remember Nate?
Did he pass?
He did.
He's a piano player,
he did
right?
pass, but
I met him one time at a blues thing, but I don't know him personally. I know a lot of people loved him, but I didn't know him personally.
He was an interesting cat, and he was subbing on one of Will Russ's gigs, and Will Russ, and rest in peace, Will. Will called Georgia on My Mind or something like that, and I didn't know it. And Nate looks at me, he's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And I was hurt. But he was also kind of right though. You know what I mean? He was also kind of like,
oh yeah.
He was like, man, you've been doing this long enough to where you kind of should know that. Every time I saw Nate after that,
it's fair.
And it came up. We had it. We had it together. Let's talk about projects that you have coming on, where people can find you. I know you're not a big social media guy.
I don't do enough in social media, but I should do more. The things I'm working on right now, I'm working on a musical for the next month. It's incredible.
You playing it? You're playing in the pit?
No, I'm recording it.
Oh, okay.
I already recorded all the singers, so just as an engineer. I've recorded and mixing it, and it's this incredible story about the Filipino Cesar Chavez. There was a Filipino farm worker who was instrumental in workers' rights in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
and it's so powerful, like so powerful. So that's incredible. Actually, it's with Alicia Jeffrey.
Oh,
Uh,
nice. Oh, yeah, Alicia, man. You know, I used to work with Alicia a lot.
yeah, who
Yeah.
I adore
Yeah,
Alicia.
she's
But I'm
awesome.
working. I don't know what else I'm working on. You know, I work for Narda, so Michael
Sure.
Narda Walden. I'm a house engineer for him. So we're always working on tracks, but I don't know when they get released. You know,
Yeah.
I'm on the ground, not in the stars.
I understand. I understand.
um, I don't know. I don't know what else I'm working on. I Chris Berger just released another record that I mixed and recorded all the vocals for.
Nice.
I'm working with a local rock band called One and Done. Another band, Canyon, is getting ready to go in the studio. So just a lot of mixing, a lot of engineering, gigging wise. Church, corporates. We opened up for Nika Costa with Sally the other
I
week, so
saw
that was
that.
really
How
big.
was that?
And oh, it was great, but the sound was really bad.
Really?
Sound
Was that
so bad in that room.
what
It was so
venue?
boomy.
What venue was it?
Cornerstone in Berkeley. I was so boomy. It
Oh,
was
I know
really
that.
hard to
I
play,
know
and it
that.
was
I know that place. I know that place. I saw Daryl's band there
yeah,
before I moved away. I remember that spot.
yeah. So those are all things I'm working on. I don't know what else off the top of my head. There's always something.
Always something. Just trying to keep the lights on. I understand. Well, Cam, look, bro.
Yeah,
I appreciate your time.
yeah.
You know, I love you like a brother. And I'll say
Oh,
that
yeah.
publicly,
Same
privately.
thing.
You know what I mean? Say it. I'm going to stop
You too,
now.
my friend. No, it's been. I hope. Well, here's some encouraging things for bass players. Okay.
Yeah.
Bass players more than any other instrumentalist get it in their head about soloing. Okay, you guys don't fucking trip about soloing. Okay, you don't need to be John Coltrane, and you can do your thing. It could be melodic. It cannot be a whole lot. It could be a ton. It could be mostly groove based. The only thing not to do, two things, is a badly intonated bend. Okay, if you're losing it on a solo, don't try and bend and not make the pitch. That's like waving the white flag. And don't play the melody to Jean Pierre. If you do those two things while soloing, I'll know that you're lost and that you need help and that you're sinking. But no, in all seriousness, bass players get it in their heads that they can't solo, and it's like soloing just means playing without other people around. And you know, a bass player can be one of the sexiest things ever when soloing. It can be the hottest thing.
Man.
Do your thing. And then
What do you have against Jean Pierre?
it's not the song, it's that bass players will play that melody when they don't know what to do. It's another one of those things.
You know what? I have.
You're just like, oh, dude.
Dude, I have one. I have one. I have one of those licks that I do, and I know that everybody I play with,
Yeah.
whenever I do it, they're like, "Hey, he goes with that shit again." It's true. Now I'm self-conscious. I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
I'll never do it again.
Like I said earlier as well, is that everybody has a little, and I didn't say it quite as articulately as I'm going to try to here, but depending on where you come from as a player, everybody has a little bit of imposter syndrome. So like I said, rock and funk players are like, man, I can't make it through changes like jazz players. And jazz players are like, well, I haven't, really like worked on pocket or whatever. And, everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses. And, if you're working, you're doing something right. And if you're not, then keep working in your own time.
You know what? We're going to land a point. That's perfect.
If you're passionate, you can get there. I love you, my friend.
Love you, bro. I appreciate you, man. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Blue Collar Bassist Podcast. Look, do me a favor. If you haven't done so already, go on and hit that subscribe button and the like button. Share this with another musician who you think might find value in it. And also let me know what types of content you'd like to see from the YouTube channel and from this podcast. I will catch you in the next episode, whether that be live or pre-recorded. You know where to find me. I will catch you in the next one. Peace. Two fingers.